we want to thank you for coming out tonight. We know the roads and the weather aren't the best, so thank you for making the effort. We want to thank Bob Waterman. We worked with him over at Gary's house on putting some of this together. We said we wanted to call it, Where the Hell Did All These Gabeleins Come From? But Bob came up with a better title. It's the Gabelein Family, Facts and Stories from Raymond's Family. If we told you all about all the Gabeleins, we'd be here about a month. So we're just going to limit to Raymond Gabelein's branch, and maybe in the future some other branches will come along. So we're going to each introduce ourselves and our family. And we're going to start at the oldest and work our way to the youngest. So Gary is first. All right.
Thank you. And again, thank you for coming. No, I don't need a point. Well, welcome everybody for coming in through the weather and enjoying an evening with us. My family, some of my family is here tonight. My wife Janie and John and Wendy, and then I have at least one more. She's in Oak Harbor stuck in a snowstorm. That's my immediate family, and then Wendy's husband is doing the PowerPoint and things like that, and then he's got Curtis to help him if he needs it. So that's my family.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Gabelein Altenberg. I live in Redmond, and I have one son who couldn't be here tonight, but he lives in Seattle. He's 35, and I'm glad to be here tonight to share our story. Thank you.
Okay, Ray, you're next. I'm youngest.
I'm Raymond Eva Mae. My wife Lori, and we have a grandchild Eva Mae here with us tonight. And we have 3 children. Our oldest is Brian Gabelein. He's married to Kiera. Our middle child, Tim Gabelein, is married to Brianne. And we think they're en route yet, but they are both working today, so they may or may not make it. And our youngest, Becky, and that's mother Eva Mae. And that's our. So we have 3 grandchildren. Brian and Kiera have 2 boys, and we have Eva Mae. So we have 3 grandchildren, just enjoying the heck out of the grandkids.
My name's Sandy Marshall, and my sister and I live about 10 minutes apart from each other. I guess further now. I was in Sammamish, and now I'm in Kirkland. And my husband's Rob, and he's at a homeowners meeting tonight, so he couldn't be here. He works in Seattle. And then I have 2 boys, Austin and Colin. And Austin got tired of the weather here and moved to LA, so he's down there working in social media advertising. And my youngest son, Colin, is a CPA with KPMG in Fort Worth, Texas. So they couldn't be here tonight because they're in California and Texas. So we're going to start the slideshow. And the paper, I know that it said that our great-grandfather was Gustav, but really his first name is Emil. But it worked out kind of good because we wouldn't get confused with an Emil in the next generation. So Emil Gustav Gabelein was born in 1861 in Bubendorf, Saxony, Germany. His mother died when he was young. His father, Wilhelm, was a stonemason. He remarried, and step-siblings joined the family. Emil learned the shoemaking trade. As a young man, he enlisted as a sailor, sailing to India, but later returned to shoemaking in Germany.
Could you show us where that is on the map, where he came from?
So where it says Saxony, Germany, right in there. And
okay.
Yeah. So I know that Mom and Dad always said, you know, West Germany,
okay.
that the family came from West Germany. So Emil married Emily Anna Kretschmar in Germany in 1881. They had 3 children, Hedwig, Arthur, and Milda. Arthur is our grandfather, and he was born in Germany in 1888. In May of 1890, the family took passage to New York. From New York, they went by train to Russell County, Kansas, where Emily had relatives. They purchased an 80-acre wheat farm, and 2 more children were born here, Helen and Albert. Then, crops failed year after year in Kansas, and the family loaded the covered wagon and traveled for 6 weeks to Spencer, Wisconsin, which you can see on the map. They moved into an abandoned farm, and Elsie and Walter were born here. The family then moved to Hayward, Wisconsin, and homesteaded 160 acres, with a 30-acre lake on the property, later known as Gabelein Lake. During the 8 years they lived here, they had 2 more children, Martha and Felix.
Yeah, well, the picture kind of tells you a little bit about life. If you take a look on people's faces there. It wasn't all roses. Cold winters and tough to scratch out a living trying to plant things in the dirt and hoping it would grow with all those kids to feed. So I think as you go through this, you'll see that, in my opinion anyhow, each generation had it just a little bit easier. Each generation had it just a little bit easier than the previous generation. And I think that through hard work, the older generation was hoping for that if they worked hard, maybe they could make enough to help the younger generations.
So, in what Ray is talking about, they had 13, I guess you could say, pregnancies they born to Emil and Emily, but out of those 8 survived. So you can see the family tree there. Of the children who did not survive, they were not named in the history, and Milda died as a young child. Well, Emily's health failed, and on the advice of a doctor, the family traveled by train to Everett, Washington. The oldest daughter, Hedwig, married Herman Hagen, and they stayed in Wisconsin. From Everett,
What? Oh, they just
Sorry.
Langley first.
okay. So from Everett, they went by boat to Whidbey Island, where they heard of a 25-acre farm available above Useless Bay. There we go. So you can see on the map there, Austin, Freeland, and Useless Bay. So the farm is, you can see the double bluff.
Farm would be right up in here.
So it's just 25 acres that they came to there. In 1908, they settled on the farm, and Emily's health improved. They had large gardens and orchards in which Emily worked from sunup until sundown. They fed their family from the game, the seafood, and the crops. They also sold produce in Everett. They were self-sufficient, only purchasing spices, sugar, and flour.
So the house that they moved into was right there. That was great-grandfather's, and then this is the house that our grandfather had that later on then my parents had right there. So that was still just 25 acres there. It was that place, the great-grandfather ended up with 10 acres, and then the grandfather bought 15 acres from him. So the 2 families had 25 acres to basically try to scratch a living out on. And it was in future generations that they started buying more property. But those 2 generations, the great-grandparents and grandparents, just had the 25 acres there.
So Emil, our great-grandfather, died suddenly in 1918 at the age of 57. So Emily continued to live and work on the farm until she died in 1944. So that was quite a few years that Emily was there on the farm. Their original house off Gabelein Road is where Felix, Arthur's youngest brother, later lived with his wife Mabel. The house stands today on the property, now owned by the Cheseltons, And we have this picture that Ray will explain, since our grandfather died young. Felix, the youngest of that generation, is in this picture.
Right, so this would be my grandfather's generation right there. That's Felix, as Sandy said, he was the youngest. So he was standing in for my grandfather. This is my dad, Ray Sr. right there, and myself when I was much younger. And
A mustache.
our oldest son, Brian, right there. So we wanted to get a picture of 4 generations, and Felix stood in for granddad.
Yeah, and I know I had Mabel and Felix as my grandparents at the wedding. Since I'm so young, I never knew my grandparents, and so I had to borrow some. So Arthur, our grandfather, bought 15 acres from his parents, and he rented marshland for his cows. He farmed the land with his workhorses and hired out farming for others to make a living. The sandy soil on South Whidbey was not conducive to farming, so an idea was introduced to build a dike to create more fertile farmland in the area known as Sunlight Beach. Arthur was instrumental in the building of the dike and the formation of Diking District Number 1 in 1914.
Right, so those of you that are somewhat familiar with that area, this was the original dike that was built, just basically the landowners built that to reclaim some land so they could have some bottom land to go along with the sandy or upland soils. They wanted some bottom land. And this particular map shows you, it's hard to read there, but that says proposed dike. And so people that are familiar with Useless Bay, it's what we call the back dike, and this is Deer Lagoon in here. Well, this water, prior to both of these dikes being built, the water used to go along this line here, about where the state highway is now near the phone company. That was all part of Deer Lagoon. And so the farmers wanted some bottom ground, and over a period of years they built this one, and then the Diking District itself was formed in 1914, and both my great-grandfather and grandfather were original petitioners to form Diking District Number 1. And Grandfather Covis, not to get off on another, okay, William Covis built this outer dike himself and turned that over to the Diking District. And then the Diking District built this, what we call the back dike. And then this dike went away, and this all became farm ground in here, and this is now a golf course over in here. But they reclaimed all that land to farm.
So Minnie Juliana Kramer and her son Lawrence came from Nebraska to visit her sister Millie and her husband Philip Wall at what is known as the Wall Farm in Freeland. Minnie met our grandfather Arthur, and they were married December 24th, 1913 on Christmas Eve. They had 7 children together who joined Lawrence in the family. They had Emil, Matilda, who we called Tilly, Violet, Arthur, who we call Johnny, Harvey, Alvina, and our dad, Raymond, who is the baby. Violet died in 1924 at the age of 5 of scarlet fever pneumonia. And I stopped to check the date on her grave. It's right there at the front of the Bayview Cemetery. And she died in 1924. And I know Mom and Dad told me she got very sick, and they did everything that they could for her, and they were so desperate. They loaded her in the, if you can imagine this, loaded her in the horse and buggy to try to get her to the doctor in Coopville. And unfortunately, she passed away. So Minnie was 8 months pregnant when our grandfather Arthur died in a well he was digging on the property on the farm right above the house. It caved in on March 4th, 1925. So our dad, Raymond, was born April 24th, 1925. So right after his father died, he was born. This left Minnie with 7 children on the farm and what they called a mother's pension at the time of about $35 a month to raise the 7 children. So Emil, as one of the older sons, took charge of the family, and the family hunted and trapped and worked on the farm and logged for others to support the family. The children grew up fast and made it through the Great Depression by working alongside adults. And this picture is back was a picture of our dad working alongside his eventual brother-in-law, Mom's brother Milt. But the Gabeleins were younger and they worked right alongside the men logging.
I have a funny story to tell about my dad growing up on the farm. And I spent a lot of time with Aunt Tilly. She lived in town, and of course, her daughter wanted to live on the farm and thought that was really cool, but I thought being in town was really cool also. So I spent quite a bit of time with her, and she used to tell me stories about growing up on the farm. And I asked her one time, I said, "Did you get along with Dad when you guys were younger?" And she said, "Well, as long as Raymond did what I told him to do." And I said, "Well, what happened if he didn't do what he was supposed to do?" And she said, "Just ask your dad about the big dent in the kitchen wall in the farmhouse." So, of course, I had to ask Dad as soon as I got home. And he said, "Your Aunt Tilly threw a frying pan at me." And he said, "She almost hit me in the head." And it wasn't a small frying pan, it was the big black iron skillet. And if she would have hit me, it probably would have killed me. So that was a funny story that she told me, but it kind of explained why my dad always had such respect for Aunt Tilly.
So Grandma Minnie, she was a dedicated mother, and she sacrificed much to provide for her children. She was known to be a great baker and cook. She loved when the grandchildren were born and enjoyed giving them peppermint candies when they came to her house to visit.
Yeah, so part of that about her being a good cook and baker, Grandma Minnie, was after our dad married our mom, Mom would make something, might be potato pancakes, maybe what they call the German prune cake, or whatever it was, and my dad would dive in. He wasn't shy on eating food, and get about halfway through, and he'd say, "You know, I think this is almost as good as my mom used to make." And our mom was a heck of a good cook, and I didn't know to this day why she didn't take the frying pan. Because she had 5 mouths to feed too, besides being a farmer's wife, and she was an excellent cook. But yeah, he'd wait till he's about half through, and then say, "This is almost as good as Mom used to make." But I think his mother spoiled him because he was the baby, so I think she was constantly making him extra treats or something to spoil him.
So Raymond, our dad, being the youngest, like Ray said, the baby of the family, he took over the family farm, purchasing 15 acres from his mom. Raymond's brothers all worked hard and saved and acquired property on the hillside and in other areas of South Whidbey. Alvina and Tilly, Dad's sisters, both married and moved to Seattle, but later had summer places here on South Whidbey. So a house was built for Minnie up on the hillside above the original farmhouse. With all the children raised, Minnie married Newt Iverson, and they lived in the house until her death in 1958. Raymond and Eva Mae later remodeled Minnie's house and moved out of the old farmhouse with their children in 1968.
Well, this shows the newer house, but not the old house. But in the old house, it was remodeled as the kids came along, and we shared rooms and things in there. And when Mom and Dad, when the older parents passed away, Mom and Dad remodeled it with the deck that they were building out there, and they had some bedrooms downstairs. And the girls had the bedrooms downstairs, and kind of a playroom. That had to get bigger as a bigger family moved in instead of just two people. And that is where both my mom and dad lived until they passed away.
So Raymond went to Bayview School and to Langley High School, where he played baseball. His nickname was Porky. After graduating in 1943, he played for the South Whidbey Athletic Club as a fielder.
Yeah, he had a, is there a picture after that? Yeah.
Class of 43.
Okay, there we go. Anyhow, he told stories for his whole life about playing what he called town team ball. So it was just players from South Whidbey and Coopville, and then they'd go play people might be from Fort Townsend, Connor, different places they travel around and play baseball. And one of the guys on the team was a pitcher by the name of Ray Matthews. Anybody from Coopville might know Ray Matthews' name. My dad said he could absolutely throw the ball as hard or as fast as anybody he ever saw. And so word got around about this Ray Matthews guy. And, well, his nickname was Scrawny, but the guy was a big man. And a scout heard about him and came around and said, you know, I'd like to sign you up and you could be a professional baseball player. And Ray Matthews' answer was, now how in the heck can you make a living playing baseball? That was his answer, and he never gave the guy another bit of his time. But they absolutely enjoyed playing town team ball. So this is our dad there. This is our Uncle Emil right there. And Matthews, I believe that's Matthews right there. And these are some, one of those Amos kids right there. But they had Tommy Clark was on there too. He was from Coopville. I think that's Tommy Clark right there. They had a heck of a good time. That was a quarter over here, I believe. They had a heck of a good time playing baseball, and they told a lot of stories. In particular, I remember the one when they would play Connor. Sometimes there'd be some alcohol involved, and depending on who won or lost the game, he said you had to get out of town pretty darn quick if you were the Connor. So they had a lot of fun doing it.
So in history class, so Dad graduated in 43, so in 1942-43, in his senior year of history class, he met a freshman named Eva Mae Smith. He invited Eva Mae to his graduation party, and they dated on and off for a while Eva Mae was still in high school.
So our dad did make it to graduation, but along the way there was a couple bumps. His senior year, he was spending more and more time working on the farm, not quite enough doing the homework and things. And one teacher decided they were going to fail him because he missed so much school. So he dropped out of high school senior year, but he had already been dating our mother while they were in high school together, and he attended a school dance. And a teacher got my dad in the corner and said, "Why aren't you in school?" He said, "Well, that teacher is failing me. I can't graduate. I'm just going to work on the farm." And this teacher that had him backed into the corner said, "Listen, you come back to school, I'll take care of that teacher that's trying to fail you." And he did. He came back and ended up graduating, probably to make sure he kept an eye on our mother. Well, she was in school too, but he did graduate out of school, but it had a bump along the way. But he always had a great respect for the fact that that teacher is the one that said you can do this.
And I know John is a teacher at Coopville, Bonnie was a teacher in Redmond, in Renton. I was a teacher in Redmond. And so there have been a lot of teachers in our family, and it shows you how one good special teacher who takes an interest in a student can change their life. And so we're proud of all the teachers in our family as well. Well, Eva Mae, we have to tell a little bit about our mom as well. She was born to George and Elizabeth Smith in Langley in 1928 with 3 older brothers, Milt, Earl, and Lloyd. And Lloyd was a previous mayor of Langley, so you may have heard of Lloyd Smith. She became known as Babe to almost everyone, except her dad had a different name for her, so we'll get to that later. She attended Bayview School until the district consolidated to Langley in 8th grade. Eva Mae overcame tuberculosis as a child, and she missed a year of school, so she had to take 2 years in 1 year to make up for the time she missed due to her treatments. She graduated in 1946 as salutatorian in her class of 19.
So, yeah, there's our mom right there, and she was quite proud of the fact that she was able to come from the Bayview School and go to what they call the big school. And some of the kids in the Langley School thought that the kids from out of Bayview probably weren't going to be able to keep up with them because, you know, they were the country kids from out of Bayview. So she was pretty proud of the fact that not only did she keep up with them, but graduated one of the top 2 in the class. And this was her friend Lorraine, was valedictorian, and her mom was the salutatorian.
So Lorraine became, you may know, Lorraine Disharoon, who lived on the island for a long time. So they were number 1 and 2 in their class. So Raymond and Eva Mae were going steady when she graduated, but she was determined to have a career. 2 days after graduation, she became a private secretary at Seattle First National Bank in downtown Seattle, working in the Smith Tower. She lived on Beacon Hill and worked all week and a half-day Saturday, and then took the bus to catch the ferry to Whidbey to see her family and her boyfriend, Raymond.
So after Mom passed away and we were going through boxes and trunks of memorabilia, my mom kept everything. And I came across some love letters that my dad had written to my mom during the time that she was working in Seattle. He was so worried that she would go into town, forget all about her country boyfriend, and meet some highfalutin Seattle guy and not come back to him. So he was writing her long letters, and the most surprising thing was that my dad could really be a sweet talker if he had to. So it was, oh honey, please come back to me, and oh sweetheart, you'll always be my true love. And the second surprising thing is that it worked. And they got engaged a few months later.
So Raymond proposed to Eva Mae on July 4th, 1946. So that was right after she graduated and moved to Seattle. And they were married the following year, August 2nd, 1947, in this church, right here. Eva Mae then hung up her business suits for her job as a farmer's wife and mother. One thing about Mom, you know, obviously people probably didn't know that she was a career woman in the beginning, and she thought that was very important. So having 2 daughters, when someone would say, oh, well, you got married when you were 19, and she would say, I was 19 and a half. She wanted to make that very clear that she had been independent and been a career woman. Well, then of course, right in good timing with the baby sound effects, excellent, really good. So Raymond and Eva Mae had their first child, Gary, in 1949, and then they had Bonnie in 1950, Ray in 1955, Albert in 1958, and me, Sandy, in 1963. So you can probably tell who the pictures are there. There's a kind of an extra one of Gary and Bonnie, because once Bonnie, they were only 15 months apart, so all their baby pictures are together. So Bonnie and Gary, and then Albert. Oh, that's Ray,
That's
right there.
yeah.
There you are.
That's
Okay.
Albert.
Albert and Grandma Smith, Elizabeth Smith, our other grandma. And then Gary again at the bottom with Mom, and then I'm over on the side there.
Well, after the kids were all born and things were under control on the farm a little bit, my mom and dad always tried to get us to all jump in the car and go somewhere, either on a trip, road trip or something. And one time we all got in the car and went to Yellowstone Park. Now that was quite a drive from being just an islander and stuff, but we did see the Old Faithful and everything. And an interesting opportunity come upon us. It was an opportunity for some of us, but it didn't work out. But anyhow, we stopped at a service station and everybody took their turns to do the restroom routine. So pretty soon we thought everybody was in the car and we headed down the road. Pretty soon we started giggling and looking at each other when we realized that somebody was missing. Pretty soon Mom caught on to what we were doing back there. She said, "Who's not here?" And we said, "Bonnie is not in the car." And so anyhow, us boys thought now we shouldn't have said anything, and we just kept going. But, like I said, Mom caught on to us, and she had a way of dealing with Dad as, "Raymond, you must do this." And it only took about maybe 2, maybe 3 times before we had to turn around and go back and get Bonnie, or Dad was going to be in a whole bunch of trouble. So, but we did have the opportunity to have a smaller family, but it did all work out.
So Raymond and Eva Mae farmed and purchased more land on the hillside above Useless Bay. All the children worked on the farm and spent summers making hay and renting horses to the summer people from the local beaches. Many young people came to call the farm home, helping with the horses and hay crops and participating in 4-H alongside the family members. We always seemed to have a pet deer named Bambi, who had been found orphaned and then nursed back to health with a baby bottle. Each time when it was big enough to be on its own, Bambi would live in the woods nearby and make regular visits and even come in the house.
We had the deer, we all took turns. We had a blue kind of cover outside. We all took turns sleeping in the cover with Bambi, and she came, after she got old enough and everything, she even brought her does back to the farm in the upper house there. And we always would feed Bambi waffles or whatever we were having for dinner. And one night we were having, company came, and so there wasn't really enough room for a deer in all the company, so we had to put the deer outside after we fed her some waffles and everything. We were talking, and all of a sudden, there was a crash, and Bambi jumped through the window there in the kitchen and ended up right in the center of the dinner table. So we learned that she was determined, if we were having waffles, that she was going to come in one way or the other.
How many Bambis do you think we had?
I would say 4 at least.
At least 4 different Bambis. And they would come, and the one with his horn, one male, would even roll the hay bales with his horns.
Yeah, he rolled a few other people too.
Yeah, he poked a few people with his antlers too. But on the farm, we were just gonna, Gary was gonna start us off and tell you that the main crop on the farm really were the cattle. But we had a lot of different animals. Gary, name some of the animals we had on the farm.
Well, we had Bambi, we had peacock, we had pheasants, we had the ducks and the geese, the little chickens, and their families, they always running around. And the funny thing on the peacocks, if anybody's ever raised peacocks, that the peacocks would yell, "Help!" And we'd have somebody come to visit us, and we wouldn't get worried or anything else like that, and they'd start looking sideways at us like somebody was in trouble and we were just ignoring them. But that's just the way that peacocks would sit up on top of the big barn and think they could see everything from there. And the one thing that we had for summer help, besides the beach help, is that Coach Lear, and I'm sure some of you people know Coach Lear, he had a way of getting his football team to come out and help Dad in the hay in the summer to get them ready for the football season. And you could always tell the first year farmers to the second year farmers and everything, because they were long days and they weren't making hay. It wasn't as easy as some people thought it was. And the other good thing was that Coach Lear, he'd get up in the barn right with those football players. He'd throw those bales around and maybe throw a couple of those players around if they got in his way. Because he was there to work, and he worked right alongside him, and he kept up. And when one of them had to sit down and catch his wind, Coach Lear, he'd take over what he was doing, grabbing the bales off the elevator or what. The other thing, in some of the pictures that you'll see here, or maybe on the table over there, that our parents, my dad, and other Gabeleins and friends that they went hunting with always seemed to get the larger deers, and everybody wondered how they could do it. Well, you hunt during the day and shine at night. And you find out where the big deer live and what areas they are from. Well, one night they were out around the Mutiny Bay area and shining the deers, and pretty soon they had a blue light behind them. And so they stopped, and it was one of the local county sheriffs that lived in the area, and he asked Dad and a couple of the guys that was with him what they were doing, and Dad said, "Oh, we're just out here shining out in the field, see what we could see." And this deputy, thought he was really gonna get these guys serious, but anyhow, he says, "Do you know it's illegal to shine that light at night?" Dad looked at him and said, "They don't work very good during the day."
So as Gary said, Raymond, our dad, he grew up hunting out of necessity to provide for the family, but it soon became a favorite activity of his. He had many great hunting buddies who hunted day and night, and he also enjoyed traveling to Southwest Washington, Canada, Montana to hunt elk, moose, and bear when he wasn't hunting for deer, ducks, geese, and pheasant on or near his property. Raymond and Ray shot an impressive elk in Montana that hung front and center of Raymond's trophy collection in the living room. You can see on the left is the elk that they shot together, and it now hangs in Ray's house if you want to visit his elk.
Well, Dad was always excited to go on his annual hunting trips off the island, and he'd be gone for a week or two with some of the other boys and his cousins, and he was very excited about that. Well, he didn't know that my mom was probably the most excited, because he would be gone for 2 weeks, and she could do what she wanted to do without Dad being underfoot, and she didn't have to cook 3 meals a day. Dad was a little bit high maintenance, and so she got her vacation when Dad was off hunting.
So our family, growing up, we were kind of like Forrest Gump. We had deer steak, deer burger, deer roast, deer jerky, deer sausage, anything you could make out of game, that's what we ate every day. Well, Raymond and Eva Mae were very active in the South Whidbey community as volunteers, which is all aimed at the youth of South Whidbey. At the Holmes Harbor Rod and Gun Club, they both held office of president, organized huge egg hunts and coin scrambles on Easter for many years. They were regulars at the club and had a special table with their close friends where they all enjoyed dinner dances on Saturday nights. 4 generations of Gabelein served as school board directors. Great-grandpa in Wisconsin, Grandpa Arthur here locally, and Raymond and Ray in the South Whidbey School District. 3 generations served as Dyking District No. 1 commissioners, Grandpa Arthur, our dad Raymond, and Ray. Raymond and Eva Mae volunteered as managers for the Bayview Hall and organized the famous Bayview Teenage Dances with Seattle rock bands on Saturday nights from the mid-60s to the mid-80s. The proceeds from the dances helped keep the hall's bills paid. Currently, all of us hope the community can get behind the painting and updating of this wonderful community resource. So as I said, I was at home a lot of this time when Mom and Dad were doing this, and Mom would call the Craig cook the big Seattle talent agent. She'd get the top Seattle bands, and then Dad was kind of in charge of the chaperoning. He just showed up at the dance, but he had a badge that he got from the sheriff's office, a deputy sheriff's badge. He wore it under his sweater, kind of hiding, because he wasn't really a deputy, but he would tell people he was a deputy on Saturday nights. So then when he had problems, he'd kind of open his sweater and show his badge to who he was having problems with. He also had a flashlight, a big, huge, long flashlight, and he would shine it. Again, he liked shining lights. He'd shine it in anyone's face and out in the parking lot when he thought there was any problems. There was a no pass out sign above the door at the Bayview Hall, and that didn't mean pass out like from drinking. That meant if you came in the hall and Mom would sell the ticket, take your coat and your purse, then you'd go to Dad and he'd stamp your hand. If you had a stamp on your hand, if you went out, you could come back in. So Dad was the enforcer of that rule. On the fair dances, they'd have Friday night and Saturday night dances, and they'd get about 500 kids in the hall. They'd have to stop selling tickets eventually because of the fire code. But what I really appreciate this when I think about it, they were doing that in the 80s, and I graduated in 81. They were doing that when they were in their 50s, late 50s. How many of you would be in a hall with 500 kids, loud rock music, dealing with rowdy teenagers until 12:30 in the morning? Then they'd go to the gun club while the band was loading the van, and then they'd come back and lock up the hall at 2 in the morning. So I think, how many 50-year-olds would do that? So it's pretty amazing, and the baby dances are pretty epic. Anyone who went to them has their stories about what happened in the hall, what happened in the balcony, and what happened in the parking lot.
Really? Is that something to say about that?
No, not me. I sold hot dogs and candy in the basement until I was old enough to go upstairs.
Stick to the story.
Okay. So they were also very active in the Island County Fair. Raymond and Eva Mae started the Centaurs 4-H Horse Club and were leaders for 16 years. Raymond organized the volunteers to build Horse Barn number 1. He and Eva Mae organized the arena events such as the Kitty Scramble and the Calf Scramble. They were honored as parade grand marshals.
Yeah, they built what is called Horse Barn number 1. My dad spearheaded that effort. And when I say my dad spearheaded that, yeah, kinda out on the site. All these projects that our dad got involved in, my mom was the one making it all happen. She was the one doing all the phone calls, tracking people down, doing all the things that these projects that he came up with. And she did a tremendous amount of that work, and how she did it all and raised all the kids and then took care of everything on the farm with my dad, I have no idea. Again, I think the younger generations, myself included, doesn't do nearly what the previous generation did, and as I spoke about earlier, each generation seemed to have it just a little bit better because of the hard work that some of the older generations did.
So Eva Mae volunteered as the entertainment superintendent for many years. She was responsible for hiring the big name entertainers such as Paul Revere and the Raiders, who packed the Midway. When she decided to retire from this position, she was honored to have the Midway stage dedicated to her. Raymond worked on the building of the antique barn at the fairgrounds, which is named in his honor. And this pillar stands outside of the fair, out of the antique barn. Many of the buggies, wagons, tractors, and furnishings in the cabins are from Raymond and Eva Mae's collection. In later years, you could find Raymond and Eva Mae in the antique barn, greeting visitors from the opening of the gates to the closing each day of the fair. They loved to share this history with young and old visitors during the fair. Although they never retired from farming, spending time with their children, 13 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren at that time, they had, at the time, it was their favorite activity. Besides watching or listening to Mariner baseball, Eva Mae was honored as hometown hero and has the honor of being the first feature in the book.
Yeah, this picture here always reminds me, we took our mom with us when we went to spring training one year down in Arizona. And Joey Cora was on the Mariner team down there. Some of you remember Joey Cora as a Mariner. And I think part of the reason Joey got so fast, he was running from my mom. She was chasing him from one side. Every time he'd go to sign autographs, she would run to that side of the stadium. And about that time she got there, he decided to come back over on the other side of the stadium. She chased him back and forth. And I used to tease her. That's why Joey Cora was so fast, was from her chasing him all around the stadium in Arizona.
And can you tell who's on first base there? It's Ken Griffey Jr. So she and Dad love their baseball. Gary, you want to tell about the hat that Dad used to wear?
He, when he went to show off at a party or something, he always wore the same hat. On the hat it said, if they'd known that grandchildren were so much fun, they'd have had them first.
So Christmas Eve at the farm with the whole family together was Raymond and Eva Mae's favorite time. The white elephant game became a tradition, and the family continues that tradition each year and cherishes those days at the farm.
Except for the rules that people change every year.
Summers for Raymond and Eva Mae were consumed with making hay and corralling and feeding hay haulers who could survive a day with Raymond. But if the hay was in the barn by the 4th of July, you would find Raymond and Eva Mae at the beach enjoying grilled oysters and fireworks with the family. Raymond farmed up until his death in 2003. Eva Mae lived in the family home and enjoyed her friends and family until her death in 2006. The Raymond and Eva Mae Gabelein Scholarship is awarded each year at South Whidbey High School to a deserving senior who exhibits a strong work ethic and commitment to the community service. Raymond and Eva Mae's children gifted the buggies, wagons, and collectibles to the South Whidbey Historical Society and invite everyone to support the efforts to preserve these items by joining the Historical Society and being greeters in the barn during the fair. I happen to bring a sign-up sheet tonight for the antique barn. The fair's coming right up in July, so if you're interested in sitting at the table and greeting people, you can sign up there. And together we can keep the history of South Whidbey and the Gabelein family alive. The membership into the Historical Society starts at $20 a year, and that's a pretty good investment. So you get newsletters and updates. They have a great Facebook site, so consider signing up. All the information's on the back table. We encourage everyone to support the efforts to maintain the Bayview Hall. Goosefoot awarded a grant for the painting of the outside of the building, but it's just a start because it's a big job with lead paint on the building that needs to be scraped in a special process. So that's another area if you're interested in helping preserve things that were important to my mom and dad, look for that. We want to thank you for coming again. We know the weather wasn't the best. We hope you learned something about this branch of the family. I guess if you have a few questions, any questions, we'll try to answer.
Yeah, as we, Sandy talked about, this is just one branch of the family that came here, but there's many more branches, but you wouldn't fit that all into one evening, I don't believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the editor called me, and one of his questions for the reporter, he asked me, he said, do all the Gabeleins live on the south end? Do they live anywhere else? Or something like that. He asked me, how many Gabeleins are there? And that's where I really said, well, you look in a phone book, count the number of Gabeleins in there, and not all of them have a landline. A lot of them deal in the portable phones. But I said, you multiply that by 2 or 3 marriages and 4 or 5 kids each and everything else. You know, it's kind of a wild number, but you guys, everybody can take a guess at it.
Do you remember the reunion Emil had in '76?
In
Of his house?
And his house.
When you ran out of name tag at 275.
And in the winters there, we used to go over to Amels there and and play on the ponds at night, you know, skate on those until 3 o'clock in the morning, have bonfires and everything else like that. Yeah, Amel had parties there. I played ball with him and stuff like that. But we always had fun if Amel was involved.
So we have Raynard's son, Dad's cousin Raynard. This is his son Bob. So we have another Gabelein. And
I had a late arrival that my wife and my son Tim, supposed to stand up. His wife Brianne is around us.
She's got the
babysitting.
Oh, she's got Eva Mae. Okay.
Are there any other Gabeleins that?
back here.
There we go.
I'm Karen Gabelein. I'm the daughter of Les Gabelein. I'm actually a headliner now, so I converted, but I'm niece of Bob.
Yeah, so you're
Les and Bob are
brothers.
yeah.
So you're Raynard's
I'm Raynard's
granddaughter.
I'll tell you how you could deal in numbers is when we built our last house. We moved 4 times and stayed on the same mail route. But anyhow, we built a house now, which is now called Sunshine Lane there next to my mom and dad's driveway. And when we started building the house back then, you know, most of everybody had just numbers, not a name on the street. So I told Janie, you call the county and you check about getting a name on our road. So she did. So she called up the county one day and she said, we'd like to put a name on our road. And so they talked a little bit. Pretty soon the lady says, well, how many people you got to have a name on your road? She said, you got to have 5. How many do you have? At the time we only had 3. So Janie says, well, the road next to us, it only has 2, it has maybe 4 permanent residents, and that road's been named forever. She said, well, what's the name of that road? And she said, it's the Gabelein Road. She said, you know those darn Gabeleins, they get everything they want. We've lived on the road for over 30 years, and this is the first year we've had 5 people live on our road. They've all the old houses and everything finally got occupied there. So now we're legal if they change the rules. And the other part of that story is a few years after we had the Gabelein Road, we got a certified letter from the county and they were updating their road names and they found out that there was another Sunshine Lane road name up in Oak Harbor. And Janie explained to the lady that we were approved and we were probably the first Sunshine Lane, so we think we should keep it. And the lady says, well, what's your name? And so Janie says, well, Janie Gabelein. She said, well, you must have gotten that envelope in here. Please disregard it.
And then also, so Gabelein Road off of Bayview Road, a new road was built through the property there that my mom and dad owned, and that's called Eva Lane. So that's the new name for the new road down to the original, the little house that was built for Grandma Minnie. That road leads into that property now. So look for Eva Lane. Any questions?
Gary, how long were you with the fire department?
I was a volunteer fireman for 43 years. That was the best free job I had. I enjoyed it, and that's another way to serve the community. Every time I go by a place or something like that, I tell Janie, I remember when that place burned down or something like that. It's not always a good thing to remember, but it's an interesting venture, and we need more volunteers. So you just go over to the Freeland Fire Hall and sign up. And when I got to be a fireman, when I decided to be a fireman, I went down and saw the chief. He handed me a plectron and a set of bunker gear, and he said, this is on-the-job training. And now they have about a 4-month training class to put people through, and more than that if you want to be an EMT. It was, and John, he took over after I slowed down. He's doing everything I did once, and you can't ever catch him home. He's always out on the road somewhere. But yeah, it's a great job. It's a way to serve the community.
Are you going to participate in the stair climb?
That man right there.
Yeah, we had a party.
You're not gonna do it anymore.
I do it 5 minutes and I run.
We had a party at our house in Kirkland at, around Christmas time, and John came in, and that morning he decided to practice for the stair climb. So he'd gone and climbed all the stairs just as a practice. So pretty impressive.
He was a little sweaty when he got there.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.